overseas. I love that kind of stuff. And what was happening at that time, people coming up to me, she just started. Why you put money behind that to give her certification? She hasn't earned the right to be in that position. But as a leader, I made that choice because transformation was, and there was an opportunity for that. So how dare I rob one of my team members of that opportunity? So you have to think about, when are you making the choice to lead in a healthy way? That is transformation. So do you all desire to be transformative leaders? You have to really be honest with yourself. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm just here to get my paycheck. I'm just here to do what y'all asked me to do. I'm only focused on my outcomes. What is you all's goal of leadership? Is somebody willing to tell me what type of leader, when you can look at that list up there where you're more comfortable or where you're not as comfortable? I see you looking. You messed up. Damn.
The kind of leader would be just to develop my people to be, all that they can be, to grow in the directions that they want to, raise them happy and challenged.
Happy and challenged. So we know that that combination can exist, right? I love it. So that sounds like the transformational leadership to me, right? I love it. I love it. Is there anybody who can say, you know what, I'm more comfortable in certain realms of leadership than others? Anybody willing to be honest and tell us about that? Because sometimes it's easier to be the person who just has to give information and doesn't have to deal with the emotions of the staff, right? So you're like, look, here's your task, just get it done and have it done by this date. And use me the least amount as possible. We know that happens, right? But you may not admit it here, but we know that those are those days where you just don't want to be brother at all. Get your room. So we want to think about that.
Exactly.
All right, and so we talked about that. So let's go ahead and dive in. So you all have your handouts where you all are going to be writing your things. So key number 1 is to honor everyone's journey. And my thought is that you can't honor anyone else's journey if you don't honor your own. And so the best example I have of this is one of my staff. I was one of those horrible leaders that didn't let people take lunch breaks. I'm like, if we were rolling, I'm like, what do you mean food? We gotta finish this. And I had a horrible phrase. I'll let you just take you 5 minutes. I would say that all the time, and it would just, my analysts, they hated me. Because they were like, do you not know what it takes to pull the data? And I would be like, you'll be all right. And because in my expectation, and I wasn't taking and factoring in all of the things that they needed. And the biggest part was, I was willing to sacrifice at that level. So I expected them to do the same thing. And finally, one of my staff said, no, I'm going to lunch, and you should too. And they forced me to leave lunch. And that was a way of saying, okay, I'm happy with it. Now, I wasn't that bad of a leader because they actually evicted me. When I got my promotion, I literally would not move into the corner office. I liked my little space, and everybody was like, you represent us. So I literally came to work one day, and there was an eviction notice on my door. And they had moved all of my items into the corner office because I was not, in that way, we're always taught to be humble. And you should, be soft, and we didn't ever recognize the praise that was rightfully ours. Yeah. And so that goes into that place of accepting your power that's either been given to you, and also that power that we run away from. So you want to think about what are those times where you had opportunities and you didn't walk in and own the power that was rightfully yours. Why didn't you put yourself there? And so we want to create a space where empathy thrives, where we can connect with people and people don't have to deny their experience, but instead they get to bring it with them. And an example of that is, let's say, for example, we have a storm happening in our workplace. We want to think about your team members. Is this their first time going through a layoff? What is that fear bringing to them? Do they really feel confident in their skills and expertise to know that they can get a job somewhere else? Sometimes that doesn't happen. And so to just tell people, oh, you're going to be okay, without knowing if they have the relevant coping skills, we can sometimes, let's get real, that's suicide city. And we have to realize the magnitude of not having that space where people can really be honest and say, hey, I need to be able to use my voice and to know that I'm being heard. I need to be able to make a choice that honors the experience that I want to have. And that's the way that I define power. It's every time you use your voice, every time you use your choice, you are using your power. So as a leader, when you make that choice to use your voice with your team members to support them, that is a powerful position. And I love this. This reminds me of, what's her name? Damn, where'd she go with the hats? Earlier, I thought about it. There we go. I thought of this slide. So establish excellence as your norm. When you want to think about excellence isn't the same thing as perfection. So as leaders, sometimes we can be extremely hard on ourselves, right? And we feel like we have to get it right all the time. And yes, we should aim for that, but there's a difference from excellence. Excellence is how I show up, it's how I breathe. It's a certain standard that I set for myself, where I know if I'm off track. Somebody else may say, oh, you don't have to do all of that. I do. Because that's my standard of excellence. And so you need to, in order for us to say this to our team members, we want to think about, do they even have the resources readily available that allow them to truly succeed at this level? So I'm always asking the question, is your data actionable? Is it to the space where your standard operating procedures and the things that they need to really truly perform at a standard of excellence, is everybody, you have a shared data lexicon, everybody's using the same language. Everybody knows if I make a mistake, I'm in a safe space where I can come to you and say, hey, I think I dropped the ball. Will you help me? Those are the true standards of excellence that we need to have, particularly in the space that you all are in. And when we don't have that, it really hurts us. So with this, you always want to think about, how do you pursue excellence? How have you been taught to pursue excellence? Were you taught to just get by? You know, what were the examples that you had in your family? What was their expectation of excellence? When you came in your house, were you allowed to have a strong C? Or was that you got a whipping? Because only A's were allowed. So you have to think about, have I gotten away a little bit with mediocrity? And is that affecting my leadership and my expectations of myself, as well as my team member? And then what do you accept from others? So this goes into what I was telling you earlier. If I'm willing to sacrifice at this level, then I had a certain place where I didn't accept certain things, not taking into consideration that may have been their best, that may have been their example of excellence. So that's that opportunity where I go in and I have to turn into teacher mode and to share that experience with them. Key number 3 is one of my favorites, and that's to advance your culture with innovation. And for that, you have to really see and know your power. And it starts with the belief of, one, knowing what cultures you're a part of. A lot of times we just stay at the space of saying, oh, race, gender, you know, even we'll go so far to say what part of the world we're from, right? And we'll talk about our language, what football teams we root for. Like, we'll go for that. But thinking of your cultures within your organization. So, engineers, what is their culture? What is the way that they vibe together? The night shift. So not even just thinking about those particular expertise, but when do they work? How they work? And then the cultures that you're a part of outside of the workplace. Are you a mom? Are you an aunt? Are you an uncle? Are you a dad? Are you a coach on a little league team? All of those things you want to think about. And in this, as you're thinking, am I really able to assess how I show up in these cultures? Am I allowed to bring my full self? Can I affect change in my culture? I always say, if you don't feel like you can get your pothole fixed on your street, you're not going to feel like you can change the world. And that's just a reality. So do you even feel like you can bring change in those smaller spaces? Because if you don't feel like you can bring change there, it's not going to show up at Boeing. And then how do you intervene? When something's not right in the culture, are you the one who speaks up? Are you the one who advocates for a safe space? You want to think about that. And I love this image because as it's talking about culture, and there's this path that isn't just a straight and narrow, but there's all of these people in the sun just talking and demonstrating that you're not there by yourself. So how in these different instances or systems that you're a part of, these different cultures that you're a part of, do you allow for yourself to be supported? When you realize that you are allowing yourself to be supported more in one culture than the other, what is it about those people that I let them in? That I don't allow others to do the same. So, and it's not a bad thing. So you have to come from a space of saying, not that I'm coming from judgment, but what is it that he's doing that I feel safe to come to him, but I don't feel safe to come to you? We have to figure that out. Is it characteristics? Is it gender? Is it just the space? It can sometimes be just the setting of a meeting. If you don't have space for questions and answers, is there space for people to talk? So sometimes we have to think about that. Key number 4. I guess this really is my favorite. I'll remember my favorite. It's to lead with vulnerability and joy. I love Brene Brown and the movement that she's made. If you're not familiar with her, she's a researcher that has shown us that vulnerability, is generally attached to shame. And instead of that, for us, we now see vulnerability as courage. And it's the ability to open up and to let someone in. And so in order for you to do that, we know that traditionally, that's not what leaders did. We felt that you had to be this hard person who got things done, cracked the whip when you needed to, because that was the way to be respected. So we have to think about how can we allow ourselves to be relatable and respected simultaneously. And I know that that's a struggle. So sometimes you may be going through the exact same thing as your team members, but you won't say it. You won't say, you know what? This has impacted me too. And you miss the opportunity to really connect and to engage with them at that level. And so you want to think about how are those opportunities handled, because it may be an opportunity for you to talk about how you're coping. It may be an opportunity for your team members to connect with each other. So we want to think about that as well. And as it says, if you want to know what is it that you value, what are the things that are important to you where you even care about the vulnerability, right? So the reason I say that, how do you value the experiences in your life? It goes back to our key number 1. So if I value this experience so much, I'm not going to be willing to share because I'm really, one, unsure if I'm worthy of letting you know that, or do I think you're worthy of hearing my experience? What are you going to do with it? What have other people done in the past when I've done that? And one of the things that I do is I always like to say, and I love this partly from the book Lean In, where we have to give ourselves permission to lean into the divinity of each other. So I have to come to a space where I trust that you're going to take my experience and you're going to match it with possibility, with opportunity, and with trust. That's hard in the workplace, particularly in the midst of a storm, because everybody we feel is out for my job. They're out for this. I have to decide, is my team needed? In our conversation we were having at our table, and I was sharing with William, and I was sharing with him that, it took my students to tell me that it was time for me to leave from being a professor. One of the sayings I said was that your genius will always make room for you. And when you truly believe that, you won't stay in a place where you're uncomfortable and or it releases the fear. And it sounds easier than done until I actually wrote my letter of resignation without a plan. And that's when I moved overseas, and I lived in Prague and Thailand and Abu Dhabi and all of these wonderful places. And that's when I met Dr. Elena. And and I wouldn't have had those moments if I wasn't willing to be vulnerable, if I wasn't willing to say, I'm having chest pains in this position as a director. I'm stressing out, I'm scared I'm going to die from a stroke. That's literally what was happening to me in my executive position. I wasn't getting sleep. I was having all kind of stomach aches. I didn't know an EAP. I didn't have time for EAP to make phone calls. When am I going to talk to a counselor? I don't have time for that. So I had to have a space and other peers where I could talk to and say, and there was this added pressure. I was the youngest director they'd ever had. I was a female. I was African American. It was just all this pressure. So I felt I had to perform in a certain way. And I had everybody there. Remember that symbol? Move me on. They moved my office. How dare I leave them? How dare I have advanced our data and taken us to a way that we've never done before? How dare I do that? Because I was tied and connected to the work. And that goes into our ability for key number 5 to thrive with efficiency and passion. Efficiency is something that sometimes gets the bad end of the stick, right? Where we feel like if you're efficient, then something's getting missed. There's another way that we can look at that. And that is when you allow yourself to align your personal mission and vision to the work. And you say, okay, how does Boeing's mission and vision align with my own? And the way you can do that is, I always say, to honor the dream of the little child within. There was some scientist in you that wanted to go somewhere. You wanted to go to the moon, maybe it was just down the block, right? And so sometimes when those tasks are just too much to bear and you're tired and you're just like, you know what, I'll get to this tomorrow, because it's tied to my personal mission and vision, there has to be a sense of urgency. I understand the magnitude of if I don't do this, it's not even about Boeing, it's about me not honoring what's within me. So it becomes a personal matter versus just, I'm not doing what the job wants me to do. And you have to think about, how does that, and especially when the culture around you, we talked about cultures, and they're saying, you know what, I'm not staying afterwards, I don't have things I have to do, and though we know morale is low. It happens. We have all of this talking in our ears, and though we see the difference, we see the wear and tear on other people in the workplace. But if I remind myself of my personal why am I here? Why did I show up? How did you feel that first day when you applied for that job and said, I'm going to work at Boeing?